Before you keep scrolling through YouTube, stop and think, what really destroys a man? The world out there or the chaos inside? Solomon, the wisest king in history, and Elon Musk, the man trying to reinvent the future, lived in different eras, but they fell into the same trap. If you want to grow, push past your limits and become a stronger man, watch until the end. This video might be the key that changes everything for you. There's something fascinating that connects King Solomon and Elon Musk, the first potential trillionaire of the 21st century. At first glance, they seem to belong to completely separate worlds. One ruled an ancient kingdom 3,000 years ago. The other is trying to reshape the future of technology, transportation, and even life beyond Earth. But there is, in fact, a real connection between these two men. Both reached a kind of greatness that goes beyond money, fame, or political power. Each, in his own way, sought to understand the internal forces, thoughts, impulses, fears, and desires that shape the life of any man, especially one who wants to become a 21st century man, responsible, emotionally mature, capable of leading his own life and caring for the people he loves. Historian Gershon Galil explains that Solomon grew up surrounded by conflict, family disputes, and pressures that would make any young man crumble. When he inherited the throne, he carried more than a crown on his shoulders. He carried the expectation of keeping alive an unstable kingdom traumatized by the wars his father David had fought. The Bible tells us that his first request as king wasn't for gold, armies, or influence. He asked for wisdom. For scholars like Walter Brueggemann, this isn't just humility, it's clarity. Solomon knew that no man can govern the outer world if he doesn't first learn to govern his inner world. Centuries later, biographers like Walter Isaacson describe Elon Musk with a similar framework. He's not a king, but he behaves like someone who feels the weight of an enormous mission. Musk doesn't rest. He's driven by a restlessness that many don't understand. He throws himself into nearly impossible projects, not out of financial necessity, but because something inside him demands that he go beyond the ordinary. Instead of asking for divine wisdom, he dives into science fiction, mathematics, philosophy, engineering, and, even without realizing it, he's searching for the same thing Solomon searched for, understanding the deep laws that govern life, success, and human nature itself. The two have something in common. They're obsessed with systems. Solomon observes nature, human behavior, the consequences of choices, the impact of discipline and disorder. That's why his name is linked to the book of Proverbs, considered by researchers like Michael V. Fox to be one of the most brilliant works ever written on self-control, justice, family, and responsibility. Musk, on the other hand, sees systems in the physical universe. How rockets work, how masses behave on social media, the logic behind innovation. But there's a fundamental difference between them. Solomon believed there's a moral order above man, what he called the fear of the Lord. For scholars like Tremper Longman III, this doesn't mean fear, but deep respect for the responsibility that comes with power. The man who grows but doesn't mature destroys himself. The man who conquers much but doesn't master his impulses destroys what he loves. Musk, on the other hand, looks at the world as a great technical problem to be solved. For him, there are no sacred limits, only limits that require more effort. Still, there's one thing in common that every man should think about. Every great achievement is born inside the mind. Solomon said, "As a man thinks, so he is." Musk lives that sentence every day by making decisions few would have the courage to make. But there's one essential detail, a detail that separates greatness from ruin. Solomon won the internal battle before building his kingdom. Musk is trying to win it while building the external world. And that's exactly what defines the fate of any man, including the one reading these lines, silently trying to become a contemporary Solomon. The first pillar: mastering your own mind. When scholars analyze Solomon's life and Elon Musk's trajectory, one point appears repeatedly. Neither of them achieved greatness just through intelligence, talent, or opportunities. What set these men apart was how they managed their own inner world. They understood, each in his own way, that before controlling a kingdom or commanding giant companies, a man needs to learn to govern his own thoughts, and that's exactly where most men fail. The book of Proverbs, associated with Solomon, states that a man without self-control is like a city without walls. Researchers like Michael V. Fox point out that this image isn't poetic, it's strategic. A city without walls is vulnerable. A man who doesn't master his emotions, his discipline and his choices always lives at the mercy of circumstances. If he's motivated, he moves forward. If he's tired, he gives up. If someone criticizes him, he falls apart. That's not power. That's instability. And instability doesn't build a legacy. Solomon's story shows the opposite. While still young, he understood that having dreams isn't enough. You need internal structure to sustain them. That's why he asked for wisdom. He knew that the man who knows himself gains an advantage in every area of life, in family, at work, in difficult decisions, in conflicts. For scholars like Tremper Longman III, this request is the first step for any man who wants to evolve, recognizing that he doesn't control everything, but he can control himself. Elon Musk, although he doesn't use the same words, lives the same idea. Biographers like Walter Isaacson show that Musk is obsessed with a type of thinking he calls first principles, breaking everything down until you reach the fundamental truth. This applies to rockets, to business, and to his own mind. He tries to identify useless thoughts, emotions that hold him back, and habits that interfere with his goals. It's a hard process, often chaotic, but still a conscious effort to master his own interior. This pursuit of self-governance is what separates ordinary men from men who build something meaningful, and it's also where many fail, not for lack of ability, but for lack of clarity. The truth is that most men live reacting to the external world. They work under pressure, make impulsive decisions, act to please others, try to appear strong when, inside, they're confused. They're men who want respect, but still don't respect themselves enough to organize their own lives. Solomon, on the contrary, believed that self-control was the foundation of everything. That's why he taught that thoughts are seeds, actions are fruits. The man who wants to change the world needs to first change how he thinks. For him, and for many later philosophers, no one becomes wise by accident. It's a decision, followed by daily practice. Musk applies this principle without using spiritual language. He creates rigid routines, sets aggressive goals, and eliminates distractions with a coldness that even scares his collaborators. And by doing so, he proves something essential. Discipline isn't punishment, it's power. Discipline transforms energy into results, emotion into focus, ideas into construction. But there's an important detail that scholars and biographers point out when comparing these two men. Self-governance doesn't mean perfection, it means direction. Solomon used wisdom as a moral compass. Musk uses logic as a tool for advancement. Both understood that if a man doesn't govern his interior, the exterior destroys him. And here's the reflection every 21st century man needs to make. What happens to me when no one is watching? What kind of thoughts do I govern? What kind of impulses do I allow to command me? What do I build internally before demanding respect externally? Because in the end, every man faces the same truth. There's no stable kingdom without a stable king. The shadow that follows, every man. When you observe the lives of men who achieved great feats, it's common to imagine their rise was linear. It seems like everything always worked out, as if talent and determination were enough to guarantee success. But scholars of ancient history and contemporary researchers make it clear, no matter how brilliant a man is, there are internal limits that, if ignored, begin to corrode everything he's built. Solomon and Elon Musk are two striking examples of this truth. In Solomon's case, biblical texts describe an extremely intelligent, disciplined, and strategic man. He became a symbol of wisdom, built a magnificent temple, and led Israel to its economic and cultural peak. For historians like Gershon Galil and specialists in wisdom literature like Michael V. Fox, Solomon mastered the principles that transform an ordinary young man into an admired leader: self-governance, prudence, a sense of responsibility, and respect for moral order. But over time, something changed. The pursuit of absolute knowledge began to take on a different weight. According to scholars like Tremper Longman III, Solomon confused wisdom with invincibility. The man who once sought external guidance began to trust only himself too much. And when a man starts to believe he's above any rule, emotional, moral, or spiritual, the fall stops being a possibility and becomes only a matter of time. The same dynamic appears in Elon Musk's biography, especially in Walter Isaacson's analysis. Musk built companies that changed entire industries. He created bold technologies, faced financial crises, and won battles many considered impossible. But this constant advancement also brought a side effect: emotional exhaustion, impulsiveness, and a leadership style that oscillates between genius and self-sabotage. Isaacson shows that Musk lives like someone who believes limits are details that can be broken with enough effort. This mindset has led him to massive results, but it has also repeatedly put him on the edge of personal collapses, internal conflicts, and public crises. The same intensity that makes him innovate can, when uncontrolled, turn into destruction. And here's the key point scholars tend to highlight: every man lives with internal forces capable of building or ruining his own life. Solomon ignored this at the end of his trajectory. Musk fights against it daily while building his legacy. And any man who wants to become a 21st century man needs to understand this boundary. A man who takes on responsibilities, who cares for his family, who seeks respect, emotional stability, and purpose, needs to recognize that greatness without limits turns into weight, and too much weight makes any structure collapse. Israeli historian Baruch Halpern states that Solomon fell not from lack of wisdom, but from excess of self-confidence. He believed he could handle everything alone: dangerous political alliances, external influences, risky decisions. But when a man crosses his own internal boundaries, he loses the clarity that once guided him. The same happens with Musk. Isaacson reports how moments of impulsiveness and extreme intensity damage family relationships, wear out collaborators, and create a constant sense of chaos. The man who tries to control everything out there ends up losing control in here, exactly the opposite of what a 21st century man seeks. And that's an essential point of this narrative. Every man has a psychological, emotional, and moral limit. Whoever ignores this limit pays a high price. The fall, whether big or small, doesn't start from the outside. It's born inside the mind, at the exact moment when a man stops practicing what once made him strong. And here comes a necessary reflection. How can a modern man who wants responsibility, emotional stability, and respect avoid the fall that hit such grand figures? The scholar's answer is direct: by recognizing vulnerabilities before they turn into weaknesses. Contemporary biographers' answer is clear: by building internal limits before expanding external limits. And life's own answer is simple: no one keeps an empire standing if he loses balance within himself. The moment of truth every man must face. There's an inevitable point in the journey of any man seeking greatness. It doesn't matter if he's an ancient king building stone temples or a modern entrepreneur launching rockets into space. This decisive point arrives for everyone, the instant when he realizes that power, money, or recognition don't resolve the internal conflicts he carries. External shine doesn't fill internal emptiness. Conquest doesn't heal wounds. Success doesn't eliminate what a man tries to hide from himself. Solomon faced this moment when he realized his mind, once organized and disciplined, had become a labyrinth of excesses, desires, and confused alliances. Elon Musk confronts this from time to time when his intensity crosses healthy limits. And any ordinary man, battling daily to be a 21st century man, will also encounter this point, sooner or later. It's the moment when life demands that he face himself without masks. The danger is that many men try to ignore this call. They prefer to believe that everything's fine, that they know what they're doing, even when the signs point otherwise. This seemingly simple phrase, "I already know what I'm doing," is, according to cognitive psychologists and leadership scholars, one of the most dangerous a man can tell himself. It creates a blind spot. And a blind spot isn't just a mistake, it's an invitation to fall. Solomon developed this blind spot when he started thinking he was above the principles that made him wise. Musk approaches this risk whenever he believes his ability to solve problems exempts him from basic human limits. And men seeking emotional maturity often repeat the same pattern, especially when pride tries to replace reflection. The 21st century man, however, acts differently. He doesn't hide behind ego. He doesn't allow arrogance to take the place of honesty with himself. He understands that the beginning of true greatness lies in the ability to think clearly, recognize mistakes, and adjust course. And this requires developing 4 fundamental skills: thinking from first principles, thinking holistically, thinking long-term, and not taking yourself too seriously. Thinking from first principles means returning to life's foundations: discipline, purpose, responsibility, character, and self-awareness. It's the posture of a man who constantly asks himself, what's essential here? What really matters? Solomon started as a master of this skill, but strayed when he let desires and distractions cloud his vision. Musk uses this method in engineering, but sometimes forgets to apply it to personal life. The contemporary man needs to integrate it into both worlds. Thinking holistically means seeing the whole, not just the part that favors your expectations. A balanced man considers emotional impact, family impact, professional impact, and moral impact before making decisions. He understands that every action generates waves that reach his wife, children, parents, siblings, co-workers, and even his future self. This mindset prevents him from becoming a slave to impulses. Thinking long-term is the opposite of proud haste. It's the thinking of someone who knows that building respect and stability takes time. It's also the skill that differentiates true leaders from merely ambitious men. Solomon lost this perspective when he let himself be carried away by momentary pleasures. Musk struggles to maintain it amid operational chaos. The 21st century man cultivates it as a daily principle. Finally, not taking yourself too seriously. This is the skill that reduces ego and increases wisdom. Men who see themselves as too great to fail inevitably fail more. But men who accept their limitations develop real strength because they know how to learn, they know how to listen, they know how to apologize, they know how to step back when necessary. And this, far from being weakness, is what allows them to grow without losing their own essence. In the end, that's what transforms an ordinary man into a contemporary Solomon. The ability to navigate his own mind with responsibility, emotional intelligence, and purpose. He's not afraid to look inward. He doesn't run from his shadows, and that's exactly why he can walk firmly in the outer world. 5 strategies to build a legacy that lasts. Every man seeking greatness reaches a point where he needs to make a choice. Keep repeating the patterns that weaken him, or finally take control of his own life. Solomon faced this decision when he realized his intellectual brilliance wouldn't protect him from his own impulses. Elon Musk faces it every time his giant ideas exceed the limits of his emotional health. And any man, regardless of his profession or background, also needs to face this moment if he wants to become a 21st century man, responsible, emotionally intelligent, committed to family, and honored in his own career. There comes an instant when a man realizes something uncomfortable. Success doesn't eliminate insecurities, money doesn't resolve internal conflicts, and recognition doesn't fill the void that lack of purpose creates. This is the point where many get lost. Instead of seeking self-knowledge, they prefer to believe they already know what they're doing, even when everything, absolutely everything, indicates otherwise. This exaggerated confidence is an ancient trap. Solomon fell into it when he ignored principles he himself had written. Musk faces this possibility whenever he tries to solve all the world's problems before solving some within himself. And the ordinary man runs the same risk when he confuses movement with direction. The difference lies in the choice. While an ordinary man hides behind haste, pride, or distraction, the 21st century man decides to face his own abyss. He understands that wisdom, success, money, and peace don't appear by accident. They're constructions, and like any solid construction, they require clear foundations. Here are 5 concrete strategies, inspired by studies on leadership, psychology, history, and human behavior, so any man can start building a legacy that lasts beyond his own existence. Strategy 1. Master yourself before mastering anything else. Solomon's initial lesson never loses its power. True greatness begins within. This means disciplining emotions, thoughts, and impulses. Psychologists like Daniel Goleman prove that emotional intelligence is one of the greatest factors in professional and personal success. The 21st century man creates daily rituals to strengthen his mind. 5 minutes of morning silence, reflection on his own behavior, identification of emotional triggers, practices that increase self-awareness. Only those who conquer themselves can conquer any external scenario. Strategy 2. Think in principles, not impulses. Wise men build decisions from fundamentals, not from mood. Solomon called this fear of the Lord. Modern scholars call it principle-based thinking. It means acting based on stable truths, such as honesty, responsibility, commitment, discipline, respect. When a man acts on principles, he avoids self-destructive mistakes. When he acts on impulses, he becomes a slave to his own emotions. Strategy 3. Build long-term vision. For career and family, Elon Musk gets it right when he looks to the future, but gets it wrong when he forgets that he himself is part of it. A 21st century man understands that long-term includes financial stability, a career that generates respect, a marriage protected emotionally, care for parents and siblings, a legacy for children. Research shows that people who plan their lives with a 10 to 20-year horizon accumulate more achievements and have higher levels of satisfaction. Building a vision isn't luxury, it's survival. Strategy 4. Cultivate intellectual courage. Admit mistakes and keep an open mind. The 2 greatest geniuses of their eras, Solomon and Musk, stumbled over the same obstacle, the belief that they were too great to fail. A 21st century man does the opposite. He questions himself, he asks for feedback, he adjusts course, he learns. Great entrepreneurs, scholars, and spiritual leaders agree. Men who admit mistakes grow faster than those who try to prove they're always right. Humility doesn't diminish anyone, it multiplies possibilities. Strategy 5. Create something that survives. A legacy isn't born from an abstract desire. It's born from daily decisions, small and consistent, teaching something to someone, producing work that others can use, strengthening your own family, building wealth, leaving values written, recorded, lived. History shows that Solomon's works survived for centuries. Musk's projects will survive beyond him. But any man can create something lasting, even if it's just the internal transformation he leaves as an example. the final call. In the end, the story of Solomon and Elon Musk reveals something every man needs to hear. There's no external success capable of sustaining a man who's crumbling inside, but there's enough discipline, enough courage, and enough purpose to transform any man who decides to face his own truth. Greatness doesn't begin at work, in money, or in achievements. Greatness begins when you choose to master your impulses, honor your family, take responsibility for your own decisions, and build a long-term vision, your vision. That's the path of the 21st century man. That's the path of the man who leaves a legacy. And now, your moment has arrived. If this video made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, comment below what impacted you most, and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of growth, strength, and clarity. Here you never walk alone. Transformation begins when you decide to keep going, and if you made it this far, it's because you're already ready for the next step.